attack him on all those ball screens.
Beth Greenberg on our morning show. Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin. Game 4, 8 Eastern, ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Euro 2020 round of 16. England beat Germany 2-0. Next faces either Sweden or Ukraine. The Washington football team named Tanya Snyder co-CEO joins her husband Dan with the co-CEO title in Washington.
Brought to you by Capital One Auto Navigator, where you can find a car, get pre-qualified instantly, and see your real monthly payment without impacting your credit score. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/Auto Navigator.
WOKV Jacksonville. Listen live everywhere you go on ESPN690.com. ESPN 690, a Cox Media Group station. Broadcasting live from the ESPN 690 Anajar and Levine studios.
This is Action Sports Jax on ESPN 690 with Brent Martineau and Austin Lane.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Austin Lane, ESPN, Action Sports Jax. Coming to you a little groggy, but not too bad. And why? Because shout out to the LA Clippers last night. And let me be the first one to say, I was wrong. Thought the Suns had it wrapped up at home. Thought Chris Paul was going to, go back to the old Chris Paul. Thought Cam Payne's would come off the bench and drop 20 points. But I was wrong. Shout out to the Clippers, though, because made my bedtime a little easier being up by so much. To the point where it's the fourth quarter, I'm like, I think the Clippers got it under control. I think we're all good here. Time to pound some Z's. And that's what I did. So I'm coming to you about, maybe 7 hours, maybe 6.5 hours of fresh, rested sleep. But 6.5 hours or 7 hours of a little shock that the Clippers actually pulled it out last night in Phoenix. And what a better narrative from this NBA playoff season than more unexpected nonsense going on. Like I talked about before, up is down, down is up, left is right, right is left. And look no further last night than do we dare call him playoff P? Is Paul George back? Dropping 41 points, 15 for 20, 3 for 6 from the three-point line? I understand that Paul George, he's the ultimate boomer bust player, right? Because either it's going to be pandemic Paul or it's going to be playoff Paul. And in the pandemic, we saw the worst of the worst. We saw him become an internet meme. We saw Twitter absolutely tear this guy apart. And I think at least the overall consensus was of when Kawhi Leonard got, that injury, whatever that injury may be, is the fact that Paul George wouldn't be able to carry the team. But enter Paul George, enter Reggie Jackson, who I'll be honest, I don't know where Reggie Jackson came from. Okay, I think he came from maybe the Pistons. Haven't followed his career a lot. Drops 23 points last night. And Marcus Morris Sr. And I'm calling him senior because he is the big dog. Dropping 22 points last night. A complete team effort led by, forget pandemic P, we're calling him playoff P. You earned it again, Paul George. A tip of the hat to you, sir. Now, it's not to say that Phoenix didn't play their best game, obviously, right? Chris Paul got put on ice skates. Cam Payne obviously still coming back from that injury. I mean, it's not to go without saying that Phoenix didn't play their best game last night. But this wasn't a case of Phoenix losing at home. This was a case of the Clippers showing up and playing a fantastic brand of team basketball. Now, we got to get off the whole, is Kawhi Leonard going to come back bandwagon? The guy is out for the entire year, as far as I'm concerned. If you're not going to be on the bench with your teammates and you're going to be chilling in the press box, eating popcorn or cotton candy or whatever else Phoenix has to offer, probably churros, you're not going to come back and play during the season. Like, you want to see your star player, your the pillar of your team, you want to see him on the bench. Unless he's out for the year. So Tyronn Lue can keep on at the post-press conference saying, we'll see what happens with his knee. We'll see what... No. Kawhi Leonard's out for the year. So now it's going to be playoff P show, or does he go back to pandemic P? The point is you're going back to L.A. now with all the pressure seemingly on the Phoenix Suns. I'm very curious to see how they're going to respond.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the whole narrative is how the narrative has changed around Paul George. I mean, have we seen athletes do that very often? I mean, this guy was buried.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. I mean, for a guy who was in his prime, he was about as buried as you can be in being a star, you know, and signing the big deals. And, well, he buried himself last year in the postseason, and even at some points this year, a couple missed free throws in that game with a crazy ending on the alley-oop. And now he's kind of changed it. Like, I mean, seriously, if you look at Paul George now, let's just say everything ended today, and what he's doing without Kawhi Leonard and carrying the freight and giving them a chance, I mean, I would applaud Paul George more than I would rip him from his bad moments of last year and even some of the other things.
He is seriously the ultimate enigma right now when it comes to the NBA. Because I can take last night's game, dropping 41, and once again putting Chris Paul on ice skates, making Chris Paul look foolish. But then I can go to Game 4 where he shot 25% from the field goal percentage. Like, that was his field goal percentage, 25%, and that wasn't a good game from him. So it's almost like I don't know what to make of Paul. I really don't. I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's like sometimes they ask him to do too much, whatever the case may be. Does he need like a better facilitator to get him the ball? But like I said, Game 4, he was atrocious. Game 5 last night, fantastic. It's been the calling card of Paul George. Now, like you said, last year in the pandemic, I mean, he was pandemic P. There wasn't a lot of good to go around. It's just, regardless of what happens in this series, whether they go to Game 7, whether the Suns come out and they handle business, the question with Paul George is going to be, do you build the team around him, or what is the case? Because I'll be honest, to me, it's almost like Ben Simmons. Not as bad as Ben Simmons is, but it's almost as bad as Ben Simmons, where it's like, all right, we see what Ben's capable of in the playoffs. Yeah, he's an all-star. He can get your team points, in the regular season, but can you trust him in the playoffs? With Paul George, yeah, you can trust him, but can you trust him in a 7-game series?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though. One thing I would say, if you did not have last year, right, forget about the pandemic and the bubble and all the eyes on that, and, of course, the disappointment of the Clippers, who were built to do more than they did. But if you just took this year, you would never really be asking these questions about Paul George. Like, you'd say, okay, he had a bad game here. Okay, he missed a couple free throws, but look what else he's done. Like, I think these moments would be trumping all the rest. It's a little bit like, I mean, obviously Chris Paul's been banged up, but he hasn't been doing that much offensively. Booker has even been, well, Booker was pretty good last night,